I am thrilled to be joined today by Frank Supovitz from Fast Traffic. We're going to talk a little bit about his experience in the events industry and the success he's had with his book, What to Do When Things Go Wrong. And I guess, boy, we are in need of that advice. Frank, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing out there in Long Island?
It's my pleasure to join you, and so far so good. That's what anybody who's listening or watching can only say is so far so good.
Good. Can you speak to the concept of the things you know that can go wrong, but then the things you don't know that could go wrong, and how you plan to be able to react or respond to them? Could you speak to that?
Well, when you're in the planning stage of a project, whether it's an event or a new product introduction, planning is not the very first thing you do. What the first thing that you do is imagine. Imagine all of the things that can go wrong with your project. If you're planning, you're just figuring out how to get from point A to point Z. When you imagine, you may change what that plan is. You may change how you're going to go about building that plan, because you're going to find that there's a number of things that could challenge that system, that could challenge that project or that event that you're planning.
Not that I want to do a Monday morning quarterback or any of that, but let's talk a little bit about what our communities and our nation needs to do to plan for what's going forward in this healthcare crisis. And maybe, I guess I'd like to hear from you, what should we have done?
Well, a pandemic is something so incredibly pervasive, and that's the very definition of it. It's not an outbreak or an epidemic that you've kept under control. It's something that's already out there and it's already everywhere. And that I think is the biggest challenge with what we face is the notion that we've got kind of a patchwork quilt of regulations depending on where you are in the country. I think that's probably our biggest risk right now, is the fact that not everybody's playing by the same rules. Yeah. I think that's kind of a dangerous thing in our particular instance. It's something that we should have plans for. I'm not going to say should have had plans for, because maybe we did and I just don't know what they are, and we don't know what they are. Yeah. But this is something that really requires its own plan, because there's no point of refuge. There's no place you can go to kind of stop it. It's happening everywhere at the same time. Generally, if you're dealing with something that is not a pandemic, it's great to have a plan for anything, not a plan for everything. In this case, you want to have a plan for a pandemic. In life, you want to have a plan for anything, which is, okay, if something stopped what I'm doing, how am I going to deal with that?
I want to ask you about reacting, because all of us are dealing with that now. It's a trickle-down effect. We're dealing with that in an extreme way. This business is reacting and making decisions. We didn't see this coming, and it's trickling down. People are losing their jobs, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have a choice but to react in a lot of ways right now. But it's really about how, if I understand what you're saying, it's really about how well we have pre-thought some of this.
The fact is that I think that reacting is not the right thing. Right. I think responding is the right thing. Reacting is something that you do very, very quickly. It's response and stimulus. Something happens and you immediately react to that. I don't really think that's the right, that's not the right way to go about it. I think you have to respond. You have to step back a second. It may take a second, it may take 10 seconds, it may take 10 days to come up with the right thing, right. But responding is much more thoughtful. And it really avoids what's best known as the law of unintended consequences, right? You make a decision and it has a particular effect, and sometimes that effect isn't the one you want. And the notion that we're anxious to get sports and entertainment and people back to work, and you don't want to do that so quickly by reacting to the fact that the economy is down the dumpster, which it is, and I get it, and people are suffering. But at the same time, you don't want to react to the point where now you're going to be back in the same place where you are now 3 months from now.
Let's shift gears if you don't mind. I want to hear about your book because you've had a lot of success with it. People are really all over it now, of course, too. But prior to the pandemic, it really had some traction. What to do when things go wrong. Can you tell me what was the genesis of the book? How did you go down the path to write it?
When I left the NFL in 2014 and started my own firm, a lot of companies, not just event companies, but insurance companies, real estate companies, media companies, would call and say, could you come and talk to us about how you manage big projects? And I said, and everybody talks about all the great things they've done in their career. What about talking about the things that went just totally sideways?
Absolutely.
and how you managed them and how you dealt with them, what kinds of things you learned along the way? Because frankly, not everything you're going to do is going to be perfect, and not everything you're going to do is going to be effective. But you learn, and you learn more from things that go wrong than things that go right. But it's better to learn from somebody else things that went wrong for them, right, at the end of the day. So I started talking about that, and that became very popular. And then it became a book because of the success of those speaking engagements.
Sure.
And I really started to understand that although problems don't have a pattern, the way you respond to them do, the way you manage them, there are patterns there. And that's where we came up with the notion of imagining the problems before you even start planning, how you plan to deal with those things, how you manage in real time while you're executing your projects and your programs, and how you respond when something does go wrong. And then lastly, and the last part of the book is evaluating, how you did and what kinds of things you learned and what you put into place in the future to make sure that you're better prepared the next time something happens. Because what the book says, and it's 100% true, if it hasn't happened to you, it just hasn't happened to you yet.
Yet, right, of course. Yeah. Wow. Where does blame and fault come into that dialogue?
Well, let's start with one thing that's really important. In the heat of the moment, blame is not important. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. It's your problem if you're the business owner, if you are the chief executive in charge of a particular problem or a project. It's your solution that is going to make the difference. It's your response that's going to make the difference. You may have had nothing to do with making it go wrong, but it doesn't matter. What matters is solving the problem. It's important later to find out what the real issue was, because you want to make sure it's not replicated, that you're able to make sure that there's a plan in place to, number one, make sure it doesn't happen again. Number two, if it does happen again, how you're going to deal with it.
Wow. I could speak with you an entire another hour. This is all such incredible input and great advice. Frank, tell me where people can learn more about you and your company, Fast Traffic, and where they can get the book.
Well, our company is really a business-to-business company. We're in the event world. A lot of what we do is white labeled for other organizations, but you can find us at fasttrafficevents.com. And the book you can get, it's published by McGraw-Hill. You can get it on Amazon as a Kindle. You can get it as an audiobook as well. If you just love listening to my voice, you can hear me read it. And you can get that on Audible, also through Amazon, Kindle, hard copy, etc., or through any bookseller.
Wow. I can't thank you enough. Incredible advice, really good at this time, very valuable, but also really for everybody, including business leaders. I hope you stay safe and well out there in Long Island, and thank you again for joining me.
You too. Stay safe, stay healthy, and do everything you can to stay that way.
Same for you. Take care.